In this episode of Automation Bytes, we're going to be talking about how you can quickly and easily receive data for processing in ThinkAutomation via web forms. Stay tuned. Hello everyone and welcome to Automation Bytes, a series where I take you through different ways you can use ThinkAutomation to automate your business processes. I'm Nick Proud, software architect at Parker Software, and I'm really excited to go through this new feature of ours, which is processing data via web forms. If you're new to ThinkAutomation or you're not quite sure what the product does, check out the first Automation Bytes episode where we go into a bit of more in-depth detail about the product and we talk about what it does. So processing data in ThinkAutomation, there's lots of different ways that you can receive data in the product, but one of the newest features and one of the newest ways that you can receive that data is via web forms. Now you've been able to do this for quite a while. You've been able to send in data from forms via web post, but you've had to build the form yourself and do a lot of the hosting yourself, and it was a bit of an inconvenience really. So we came up with a new way to allow you to build your own forms in ThinkAutomation, host them automatically, and then have ThinkAutomation receive the data that people input in those forms. So I'm going to show you a quick example of how you can do this in ThinkAutomation 5. Let's have a look. So let's open up ThinkAutomation 5. I've got no sources, no automations, so we're starting from fresh. So what we need to do is we need to create a new message source, and we need to select the web form message source type. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to call this source my web form. Click next, and then I'm going to select the web form type. So we've got the web form configuration screen. So we just need to give the form a title. So we could do something like, just call it your name form. We're just going to make a really basic form which just captures someone's name, and then we can do something with that in ThinkAutomation. Very, very basic. Welcome to our form is the header. So we've got a couple of other options we've got here. Again, the first video that we did went into some detail about the web form action, but there's more information for this. Confirmation message is what will display when the form is submitted. So at the moment it's defaulted to form submitted successfully. We could change that to great, thanks for getting in touch. We can change the name of the label text for the submit button. So we could say send. We could change the theme of the form. So this is quite important if you want to change the visual appearance. We could change the color, so we could set to a specific theme like dark theme. I personally love dark themes, but you can add pretty much whatever you want to the theming, including custom style sheets. So if you've got a URL for some custom CSS, you could put that in there as well. You could change the background if you want, but I'm just going to leave it as white and use the dark theme. We could also put a redirect onto this. So we could also say, if the form is submitted, it then redirects to another page. Very useful if you don't necessarily want to use the default submission message. You just want to pass the user over to another page. Who's on live chat? So that's our sister product, a live chat solution, and it integrates into the web forms if you want to use live chat in there. And of course, we want to make sure that the person submitting the form is a human being, not a robot. So we've included captcha integration as well, so they can tick that before they can submit. So there's a very basic setup of the form properties, but we obviously need some fields for people to fill in. So at the bottom here where it says form fields, I'm just going to click add, and then I'll get a survey field box which will ask me to name a field, give it a label, and define what kind of field it is. So for us, we're just going to create a text field asking people to enter their name. Whatever name you give at the top of the field, the field name at the top, will become a variable in ThinkAutomation. So it's the same as an extracted field. If we call this entered name, we can refer to this anywhere in an automation that's processing the message by surrounding it by percentage marks, and we'll get the value out of it because it's an extracted field. So the label for it's going to be enter your name. We can put some help text in there if you want. I don't really think we'd need it in the real world for this, but just to demonstrate it, we could say your full name. And then the field type is the most important bit. So this is where we dictate what kind of field this is going to be. And you've got lots of different options in ThinkAutomation for this. You've got the classic text field, but you could make it a number, a date, a Boolean variable, email or URL. So these fields will be automatically validated depending on what kind of type you choose. So if we were to choose a telephone field type, it would validate that it was an actual telephone number. Similarly for email as well, it will do some validation to make sure that it's a valid email going through. Password field, so we can mask the characters that are coming through. Currency, time is a good one, as well as date. Date pickers are really useful as well. So if you were making a form which was an appointment booking form, you could put a date picker in there for people to choose the date of their appointment and then send the data through from the form. ThinkAutomation could then save that into a database that something else consumes to say, hey, there's an appointment at this date booked by Bob. Okay, so we've got our field, enter your name, which is a text field, click OK. So we've just got one basic field on a very basic form. And at any time when we're building this form, we can check it out to see what it looks like. So if I click the local preview button and then just drag over my browser, you can see here that we've got a form, and it's got in brackets disabled because it's not complete yet, so it's not a functioning form. So the name of the form, your name form, the welcome text, and then the field that we created. So, okay, that's okay for now. That's what we need. We'll just close that out and click next. And then, as usual, because we're creating a message source, we've got to point this to an automation. So I'm just going to tell it to make a new automation. The benefit of this is that ThinkAutomation will recognize that the new automation is attached to a web form source and will create the extracted fields for us. So it will create the extraction of the name field that we created. So I'll click next, then click finish. And there we go. We've got a my web form message source, which is a web form type, and then we've got an automation which is already dealing with any incoming messages. So I'm just going to open up that automation, and you can see it's automatically entered an extracted field for entered name, the field name that we added. Now anything that comes through from a form comes through as JSON, and again, if you want this to be automatically set up for you to extract, then we recommend that you create the automation new as part of the source creation, because here it's automatically read the prospective JSON that would come through, and it's extracting the value into a field entered name. So we can do something with this. So for now, I'm just going to simply make it so that when we submit this form, the entered text pops up on the screen in ThinkAutomation, just to demonstrate the transition of the data from the form through to ThinkAutomation. So I'm going to drag in a comment action, and I want to set the comment content to this extracted field, the data that was entered in the field name. And I'm also going to say show notification pop-up in ThinkAutomation Studio. So this should pop up in ThinkAutomation when I submit the form. I'll click save, and I'm going to test this out. So because this is a web form source, I can right click it and say open web form, and it will go straight to the form live in the browser. So because we set up an automation to capture that data that's submitted and then show it in ThinkAutomation, I can enter my name, so Nick, click send, and you can see straight away that automation has ran. It's popped up in ThinkAutomation, and the changed submission text that we added, the great thanks for getting in touch, has shown to the user. So really quickly we've been able to just build a very simple form, put it out somewhere where it's hosted, and we can submit data into ThinkAutomation and process it however we want. So there's lots of different use cases for this. And at the moment we're just submitting, it's kind of like a fire and forget action for the user. They're just submitting some data and then that's it, it's been sent. But what if we want to wait for the result of something? What if we want to get a response from ThinkAutomation and show that in the form? That's possible. So let's go through an example of how we can do that. Let's make it so that the form waits for the result from ThinkAutomation. So the way we set this up is we go into the message source options, so where we configured the form, and on the confirmation message you see where we change the confirmation text. There's an option underneath that says wait for and include automation results in the confirmation message. So if we enable this, the form, once it's submitted, will wait for a response from ThinkAutomation. ThinkAutomation will run its automation that the tasks that you've set out, and then it will return a value, and the form will display that value. So I'm going to enable that, and we also need to make sure that it returns something. At the moment, in that automation, we are simply extracting what the person who submitted the form has entered, and we're displaying it locally on the ThinkAutomation screen. But we want to return something to the form, so we could just search for the return action, drag that in, and we could say, just to demonstrate it, we'll just say response from ThinkAutomation. Click OK. And now because we're waiting, the form will receive that returned value. So I'll click that to save, reload the form, and I'll just enter some more data. So again, Nick, that's my name. Just click send. And you can see response from ThinkAutomation has come through. So immediately we've received some data from the automation that's processing. So let's try and turn this into a little bit more of a concrete use case. What if we were trying to validate a password or validate that a value was correct in order for someone to proceed? Well, what we could do is we could add a new field. So we could say, here's a new field, and we'll call it pass. We'll say enter password. We'll change the field type to password. So now we've got two fields. We've got one for entered name and we've got one for pass. So if we save that and just reload the form, you can see the new field is appearing on the form. It's live. In the automation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a condition in to say if the person who's submitting the form has entered the name Nick, so essentially that's my new username, and they've entered a password of a certain type. Normally it could be checked against a database, but and obviously hashed first. That's very important. But in this case, we're just going to set our password as something really secure, 1234. Really secure. So the username is Nick and the password is 1234, and we're going to say, yeah, everything's fine. If you enter those credentials, you've been authenticated, and we would probably show some other data. And if we enter something different, we're going to say, no, access denied, go away. So let's get rid of this return that we've just added. I'm going to add a new if block. So this will be a condition that we're going to use to validate the incoming credentials. And I'm going to say if the entered name is equal to Nick, still using a capital N for this. We also need to add a new extracted field because we've added a new field on the form. So I'm just going to copy this action. I'm going to give it a new name of password, and I'm just going to add in the value that it would be, just so that we can see that it would be extracted. So we called the field pass. So there we go. And I'm just going to give that some random value. That looks like that's valid JSON. And then we're going to extract this path. So we've added that into the helper to show that that's what it would look like when it comes in from the form. And then I'm just going to select that, tell it to extract that path, and so that will extract that password that's entered from the form. So we can say if entered name is equal to Nick, and then also and if the password is equal to 1234, then we can return access granted. Yeah. And then we can also say else, and then we just need another return value here. Return access denied, go away. So yeah, obviously there's going to be loads of security things that come up around passwords. there's standard practice around how you authenticate people. Obviously, you're going to check the password that's entered against a database, and that data is going to be hashed. You're going to hash the incoming value, all that sort of stuff. But we're not going to go into those sort of developmental practices today. We're just showing a basic use case of sending data in from a form, running an automation, and then returning different values to the form depending on certain conditions. So just going over what we've made, we've got two extracted fields, the name and the password that was sent in from the form. We're still showing the notification in ThinkAutomation. There's no reason for that to go away. And then we've got an if block which says if the entered name is equal to Nick and the password is equal to 1234, return access granted, otherwise access denied, go away. So click save. It's going to reload that form, even though actually we shouldn't need to. We've not changed anything on the form. And we'll just do, we'll try and be a malicious person. So we're going to say my name is Nasty Man. And my password is some gibberish. Click send, and you can see here we've had great, thanks for getting in touch, which is the standard message, which we could remove if we wanted to. And then the actual return response from ThinkAutomation, which is access denied, go away. Nasty Man cannot authenticate. So I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. If I say Nick1234, click send, access granted. So we've been able to create a form, pass the data through to an automation, run the automation, and then return different results depending on what was sent through. So there's lots of different use cases for this, and it's probably worth going into a more in-depth video in the future, but you could do a lot of different things with forms. This in particular is probably really useful for people in the field. You could have people with a tablet, maybe an engineer who's working on something, and needs to input some changes, add notes to a case or something. So say for example somebody needed to update a case in a CRM or in a database. They could pull up a form, they could enter the details, that might have like a case number in the field, for example. It will come through to ThinkAutomation, and you would look that up against a database, find the relevant record and update it. So it's a gateway into ThinkAutomation that is hosted in the cloud. So it's easy to host, it's easy to create quickly, and it's easy to get information into ThinkAutomation via the web. This is using our new Azure public API. So when you create the web form, ThinkAutomation publishes it into our gateway in the cloud, and it's cached, so if ThinkAutomation goes down, the form is still available, people can still submit to it. Obviously if you're waiting and your server's down, then you wouldn't get the result, but the form would still be available. And then when your server came back up, you would automatically receive those messages through, so they would be put into a queue, which is saved for, I think it's around 48 hours in the cloud, and then those messages would come through. So we've made it much easier for people to quickly create things, create manners of receiving data and host them in the cloud nice and quickly. So I hope that example was decent enough to give you a good insight into how you can process data with web forms. And if you've got any questions, we're on Twitter at Parker Software, and you can get in touch with us via email at support@parkersoftware.com. In the meantime, get automating. See ya.